This is the Shanghai Pudong Airport, and it's incredibly quiet with hardly anyone around. I don't know what's going on. This airport, which used to be so crowded, is now nearly empty. I remember it used to be packed with people struggling to catch their flights. Thinking about the high fuel prices for the planes and the wages they pay to the staff, it's hard to believe that they can survive. Not to mention, many people used to book cheap tickets in advance. Yesterday, when I got off the plane and waited for a taxi, it was the same case. I remember waiting in line for over an hour before, but yesterday it was smooth all the way. Now there are only a few people waiting for taxis.
Today, we are at Pudong Airport. It's 1:03 a.m. Comparing it to yesterday at Shenzhen Airport, it's quite evident that Pudong Airport doesn't have the same level of liveliness as Shenzhen Airport. Perhaps this indicates that Shanghai is not as flourishing as Shenzhen, or could it be due to the different types of industries between the two cities? Let's head over to the departure area now and see if it's crowded.
In the past 3 years, the Chinese aviation industry has been severely impacted by the pandemic, suffering heavy losses to a staggering 400 billion yuan. This loss is equivalent to the price of nearly 700 commercial aircraft. In 2020 alone, the industry reported a loss of 97 billion yuan, followed by 84 billion yuan in 2021 and 216 billion yuan in 2022. Song Zhiyong, the director of Civil Aviation Administration of China, disclosed at a recent National Civil Aviation Industry Conference that in 2023, despite the pandemic gradually abating, the losses are expected to significantly decrease compared to 2022, but still amount to nearly 30 billion yuan. It's important to note that in 2019, the civil aviation industry had a profit of over 50 billion yuan. So when you do the math, even if the industry starts making an annual profit of 50 billion yuan from 2024 onwards, it will still take 8 years to make up for the 400 billion yuan deficit. Statistics also reveals that in 2023, the daily aircraft utilization time decreased by 1 hour and 12 minutes compared to the pre-pandemic year of 2019. The average passenger load factor and cargo load factor dropped by 5.3% and 3.9% respectively. While the industry achieved an overall profit in the first 3 quarters of 2023, it slipped back into losses in the fourth quarter. In November alone, the entire industry incurred losses of over 81 billion yuan, nearly offsetting the profits of the previous 9 months. Taking the production data for November 2023 released by the Civil Aviation Administration of China as an example, it shows that the passenger transport volume for that month was about 49 million, a decrease of 7 million compared to October, and a decrease of 4 million compared to November 2019. While such a decline is typical during the off-peak season, the actual transport volume dropping below 50 million is a cause for concern, considering China's large population and extensive fleet size. Many observers are worried about the operational conditions of the Chinese aviation industry. It's worth noting that despite the widespread losses in the Chinese aviation industry, the 3 major airlines, Air China, China Aviation Group, and China Southern Airlines, continue to receive substantial government subsidies, which to some extent alleviate the financial pressures. Smaller airlines, on the other hand, are finding it much harder to survive. But the 3 major airlines still face challenges such as a reduction in passenger numbers, rising fuel prices, and the depreciation of the Chinese yuan. According to statistics from the travel information platform Flight Manager in 2023, the overall international flights in the Chinese civil aviation industry was only 37.5% compared to 2019. Industry insiders in the civil aviation sector have analyzed that domestic tourism in China experienced a relatively rapid recovery in 2023. As a result, the industry saw profits in the first 3 quarters of the year, driven by the travel peak seasons like the May 1st holiday, October 1st holiday, and summer vacation. but it once again slipped into losses upon entering the fourth quarter, almost wiping out the profits earned in the preceding 9 months. Some people pointed out that flight tickets don't seem to have the same discounts as before the pandemic. The level of price reductions is minimal, which has affected the purchasing desire of some individuals. Given the economic pressures and the continuous strengthening of cost control by companies, many regular travelers are opting for more economical means of transportation, such as high-speed trains. Frequent flyers have also noted that in early 2023, the Civil Aviation Administration of China imposed restrictions on low-price tickets and prohibited airlines from engaging in unfair competition. This was seen as an attempt to recoup the significant losses the civil aviation sector had incurred in the past few years. But this forced approach did not yield favorable results. With higher ticket prices, one would assume airlines would start making profits. But the reality is that fewer people are choosing to fly, and airlines are actually losing more money. Some people have provided examples. For trips from Beijing to Shanghai, Hangzhou, or Nanjing, they always compare the prices of flights and trains and choose the cheaper option. Considering the time spent getting to the airport and going through security checks, the total travel time by plane is not significantly different from that of a train journey. They mockingly suggest that this once again proves that the government officials have little understanding of economics and market dynamics when it comes to the airline industry. With the Chinese New Year approaching, airfare prices have become more expensive. On social media, some have shared images that show plane tickets for Tuesday, January 6, 2024, costing nearly 2,000 yuan. For many, this is beyond their 1 month's salary, making it challenging to afford plane tickets and making it difficult to go home. People have also expressed on social media that they can't afford plane tickets, and high-speed train tickets are unavailable. They are worrying they won't be able to go home for the Chinese New Year. In addition, even though China had an extended 8-day Golden Week holiday in October 2023, China's tourism industry experienced a surge in activity. But many Chinese people opted for budget-friendly economical tourism options. The man in the video is seen taking his girlfriend on a budget-friendly trip to Yunnan, where they ride bicycles, set up tents by the roadside to sleep and cook their meals. But the internet has also expressed cautions against traveling too hastily. If you don't have enough money, I advise against being too easy with traveling. Just a few days ago, I had just finished my graduate exams and thought it had been almost 2 years since I last went on a trip, so I decided to plan one with my friends. Yunnan is a popular destination, so I checked online, and everyone said January is the off-peak season, and expenses in Yunnan aren't very high. I looked at flight tickets and hotels, and they didn't seem too expensive, so I made a rough estimate, thinking that 3,000 yuan should be enough. With confidence, I borrowed 3,000 yuan from my mom and proceeded to book economic hotels and flights. Since the prices weren't high, I thought 3,000 yuan should definitely be sufficient. But yesterday, after I booked everything, I realized that even before arriving in Yunnan, I only had 400 yuan left. Why did I even come to Yunnan? Did I come here to challenge my survival limits? Someone informed the woman that a budget of 3,000 yuan would not cover the expenses for a flight, and it was far from sufficient. Furthermore, some Wuhan residents pointed out that many of their friends were facing reduced incomes or even unemployment, making it impossible for them to afford travel. One of them said, "I don't have money, and my business is not doing well. Many shops are closed now. Unable to survive, they have all closed down. I can't stand the government's media's rhetoric." On the Chinese blogger platform Weibo, some people complained that they weren't paid overtime before, but now the government was expecting ordinary people to spend money. A Beijing resident stated, "I know that the tourism industry in many places like Guangzhou, Kunming, and Dali is very sluggish. Government employees have seen their salaries reduced, including a 40% cut in teachers' wages. In Guangzhou, for example, if a high school teacher's monthly salary of over 10,000 yuan is reduced by 40%, traveling becomes a luxury." Some people pointed out, who can afford to travel when the economy is like this? We don't have money. Even putting food on the table is a problem. The economy has deteriorated to an unreasonable extent. College graduates can't find jobs, and even food delivery is difficult. There's no other choice. Many people have stopped traveling and are staying at home. The government has become so corrupt. It has already squeezed the people dry, and there's nothing more to take. It's using this holiday to extract money from the people, but the people have awakened and are not going out to play. They are lying flat. Typically, before the arrival of traditional holidays, many Chinese people choose to go on vacations or travel internationally, driving significant consumption. But due to the economic slowdown in China, overall consumer spending has declined. The Chinese authorities have tried to boost the economy by encouraging consumer spending, but the expected results have not been achieved. A Kunming resident mentioned that in 2023, she didn't travel, and her friends around her also chose to go on trips to nearby places. Some young people, due to financial constraints, even opted to explore their local area. Many people feel reluctant to spend when considering travel, primarily because of reduced incomes, and a lying flat consumer mentality has emerged. This phenomenon has exacerbated social inequality. Some individuals revealed that due to the withdrawal of foreign investment and factory closures, many people have become unemployed, especially older individuals. Among the unemployed, some have resorted to working as delivery drivers, while others can only earn the minimum wage. People in their 30s, in particular, are facing challenging situations, especially if they have loans to repay, making their livelihoods even more difficult. The impact of the economic downturn is not limited to the general population. Even the white-collar class is feeling the chill. According to the latest research from the American management consulting firm Oliver Wyman, due to economic uncertainty, many affluent Chinese consumers have postponed their planned international trips. Survey data shows that as of June 2023, 62% of experienced international travelers plan to travel within the year. But by September, this proportion had dropped to 54%. Now, nearly 40% of people are hoping to wait at least 2 years before traveling abroad again. In addition, analysts in the Chinese aviation industry have pointed out that one major reason for the losses in the civil aviation industry in 2023 is a slower than expected recovery of international flight volumes. While domestic flight passenger volumes increased by 1.5% compared to 2019, international passenger flights only reached 37.5% of the 2019 levels, leading to a decline in aircraft utilization rates and passenger load factors. It has been reported that Cathay Pacific Airways is currently facing a crisis of reduced flights, with up to 27 flights being cancelled in early January. An executive director of a travel agency mentioned that currently only one flight group is going to Malaysia, and the departure and return dates of the group have to be moved up by 1 day. The travel agency complained that at least 7 of the groups heading to Japan or Southeast Asia have been affected. It is estimated that even if international routes are restored in 2024, customer traffic may not necessarily recover. There are many reasons for the difficulty in resuming international flights. The issues in the tourism industry are quite prominent. Due to the prolonged economic downturn, downgrading of consumer spending has become a common phenomenon. The trend of Chinese consumers shopping all over the world has diminished, resulting in stagnant passenger growth. In the first half of 2023, China ceased to be the largest source market in the Asia-Pacific tourism market. Although by the end of 2023, countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and other Asian countries had implemented visa-free policies for Chinese tourists, which provided more convenience and opportunities for travelers looking to go abroad. Tourists also found that, while they saved money on visas, other expenses had quietly increased. Taking Thailand as an example, some five-star hotels that used to cost around 500 yuan per night now have prices ranging from 1,000 to 1,200 yuan, and even local services such as taxis have seen varying degrees of price hikes. Some people pointed out that rising prices in many places are a global issue. If the salary doesn't increase accordingly, people naturally feel financially constrained. The root of the problem is that people are generally facing financial difficulties. Trade factors also contribute to the challenges in the recovery of international flights. Although China is ending its zero-COVID policy, foreign executives remained concerned about China's slowing economy, increasing geopolitical tensions, and regulatory scrutiny. This has led many foreign companies to start sourcing more products from Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Mexico. In 2023, China's foreign direct investment recorded its first quarterly deficit, and acquisitions and financing focused on China have stalled. Western trade groups have expressed that, in light of China's extensive enforcement of anti-espionage laws, unexpected police audits of consulting and due diligence companies, and travel bans on specific executives, there remains skepticism about China among some Western corporate boards. Even after the post-pandemic announcement by Chinese Premier Li Qiang, China's proposal to open its doors to foreign investors is still met with skepticism. The German newspaper Handelsblatt published a commentary stating that while China's leadership, led by Xi Jinping, is making efforts to attract foreign capital, they're also downplaying their economic challenges. The commentary points out that Xi Jinping's ideologically driven governance style is exacerbating China's economic difficulties and making the international environment less favorable for China. In addition, the Chinese government continues to maintain its partnership with a warlike Vladimir Putin. At the same time, China is striving to engage in charm diplomacy to prevent a complete divergence from the West. For Xi Jinping, maintaining these strategic contradictions may be more important than implementing economic pragmatism. This undoubtedly carries significant risks for peace and trade. Economic growth has slowed down, and the stock market has declined, with the Shanghai Composite Index down 13% year-to-date in 2023. The Economist points out that foreign investors and wealthy Chinese individuals are leaving China. International exchanges are decreasing in frequency, and the number of people traveling on international flights is decreasing, which has had a certain impact on the demand for international flights. Furthermore, the enthusiasm for studying abroad is diminishing, which also affects the aviation industry. In recent years, both the United States and Canada have seen a trend of decreasing numbers of Chinese international students. It's worth noting that the Canadian Federal Court recently ruled that a Chinese student could not enter Canada due to potential espionage risks. According to a report by Voice of America, Li Yuekang, the Chinese student who was denied entry to Canada, was a student at Beihang University in Beijing and earned a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering in 2020. Due to restrictions on international travel during the pandemic, he had originally planned to start his studies in September 2022, but his student visa application was rejected by the Canadian Department of Immigration on the grounds of possible future involvement in espionage activities harmful to Canadian interests after a background check. In January 2023, Li Yuekang applied for judicial review in the Canadian Federal Court, and on December 22, the judge supported the views of Immigration Department officials. The report points out that concerns about Chinese interference are increasing in Canada, and this decision has received support from many Canadians. It is also noted that the U.S. government has implemented some restrictions, such as reviewing student visa applications in specific fields. Additionally, analysis from Chinese airlines indicates that the depreciation of the Chinese yuan against the U.S. dollar is also affecting the aviation industry. One impact is the increase in fuel costs, as airlines typically settle fuel purchases in U.S. dollars. If the Chinese yuan depreciates, the amount of yuan required to purchase dollars increases, leading to a natural rise in fuel costs for airlines. Since fuel is one of the major operating costs for airlines, this cost increase may have a negative impact on profitability. Additionally, the cost of servicing debt may increase. If airlines have debt dominated in US dollars, the depreciation of the Chinese yuan will require them to pay more yuan when repaying the debt. In July 2022, China Eastern Airlines signed a purchase contract with Airbus for 100 aircraft at approximately 90 billion yuan. China Eastern Airlines only generated revenue of 46 billion in 2022, so the airline needs to borrow to meet the funding needs for aircraft purchases and must also pay the corresponding interest. By the end of 2022, China Eastern Airlines' debt-to-equity ratio had already reached 19%, with total debt of 121 billion and interest payable of almost 4 billion, at an interest rate of about 3%. The depreciation of the Chinese yuan against the US dollar increases the debt burden on China Eastern Airlines. Exchange rate fluctuations can also affect travelers' willingness to travel. If the depreciation of the Chinese yuan leads to higher airfare prices, it may make international flights more expensive, reducing the demand for travel, and in turn affects the airline's revenue. It can also increase the uncertainty of some international routes, including contracts and expenses involving exchange rate risk. This can add to the operational difficulties and costs for airlines. Taking all these factors into consideration, the Chinese aviation industry faces significant challenges in its recovery. It is widely believed that the aviation industry needs to adapt to the changing economic and political environment and take effective measures to promote its sustainable development. Xie Jinhou, chairman of Taiwan's Wealth Media, pointed out that while some people still believe in the Chinese economy, issues such as the US-China trade war under the Trump administration, China's real estate bubble, supply chain adjustment, and an aging population have led to the end of China's high-speed growth economic model. In order to stabilize and reorganize, China needs to abandon its past wolf warrior stance. After 7 years of adjustment, the Chinese economy is indeed moving in that direction. Xie Jinhou believes that most people have not seen the true face of the Chinese economy because they have not confronted the core issues in China. The real challenge in China lies in its authoritarian system of centralized power, which global political leaders and investment experts are hesitant to confront, thus obscuring the true state of the Chinese economy.